some opening remarks. Amin, are you there?
Oui, vous m'entendez?
Oui, oui, oui. On vous entend. I'm not sure if that's an issue with my connection. Can anyone else hear Amin speaking?
Yes, we do hear you, Simba. It's Amin that has an issue.
Ah, all right. So what I'm going to do then, in the absence of those opening remarks, is just give you a brief overview of what the context of today's session. Unfortunately, Amin has dropped off, so we will just move on with the presentation. What follows is a presentation from Ibra Wahabu, Mr. Ibra Wahabu from AUDA-NEPAD, and then we will have a discussion with our panelists. I will introduce you to the panelists after Mr. Wahabu's presentation on the call itself, and then following that we will have, following that panel discussion, we will have a question and answer session, both about the panel discussion and the context within which this call is put out, but also about specifics if you are an interested party and would like to put forward your project for consideration. And so with that, I hand over to Mr. Ibra Wahabu, who is the lead private sector development and infrastructure project preparation at AUDA-NEPAD. Ibra, please take it away.
Thank you, Program Director, but I would really like to check if the Director Amin is available. Yeah. Vous pouvez aller, Amin.
Allô?
Oui, nous vous entendons.
Allô?
Yes,
oui,
we can hear you loud and clear.
Vous pouvez continuer.
Okay. Yeah.
Ok, parfait. Merci. Allô?
Oui, Amin, nous vous écoutons.
D'accord. Est-ce que j'ai la parole, en fait? C'est ce que je demande.
Oui, vous avez la parole.
Oui, vous avez la parole. Vous pouvez continuer. Merci.
D'accord, merci beaucoup. Donc, je voudrais reconnaître ici la présence du ministre sud-africain en charge du commerce, de l'industrie et de la compétitivité. Et je voudrais aussi saluer la présence parmi nous des chefs d'entreprise et des personnes qui travaillent à la promotion du milieu des affaires en Afrique. Donc, le Covid-19, mesdames et messieurs, est une crise sanitaire qui est en train de devenir une crise économique mondiale avec d'importants effets secondaires sur le plan humanitaire, surtout sur le plan humanitaire, mais aussi sur le plan économique. On ne doit pas oublier ça, spécialement ici chez nous en Afrique. Donc la pandémie et les mesures ultérieures prises par les gouvernements à travers le continent ont déjà perturbé les moyens de subsistance de millions de personnes. Donc c'est aussi une crise en fait alimentaire. Et les conséquences sont déjà plus que dramatiques pour les ménages, spécialement les ménages avec des faibles revenus. Pour les PME aussi, et pour les opérateurs économiques du secteur informel. Comme vous le savez, l'économie africaine, en réalité, elle est essentiellement conduite par le secteur informel. Ici, à AUDA-NEPAD, au milieu de l'année dernière, nous avions conduit des recherches qui nous ont montré qu'il y a environ en Afrique entre 90 à 100 millions de micro, petites et moyennes entreprises, dont 92% d'entre elles fonctionnent sur le mode de l'informel. De nombreux pays africains riches en ressources naturelles sont aussi confrontés à un double inconvénient. Donc, des prix qui ne cessent de s'effondrer, mais aussi, bien entendu, la baisse ou la chute de la consommation dans leur propre marché intérieur. Et les experts de la Banque africaine de développement prévoient d'ailleurs une contraction de la croissance du produit intérieur brut africain qui pourrait entraîner 30 millions de pertes d'emplois et une augmentation du nombre de personnes en situation d'extrême pauvreté de 49 millions environ de personnes en 2021. Donc, en 2021 aussi, les pertes de notre PIB pourraient s'élever entre 27 milliards à 47 milliards de dollars. Donc, ceci s'ajoute aussi aux pertes subies déjà en 2020. Donc, mesdames et messieurs, les États membres de l'UA, avec des marchés florissants dans le tourisme, le commerce mondial, les exportations des produits de base, vont aussi très certainement être durablement et durement affectés. Donc, la situation montre très clairement que les effets socio-économiques indirects ne sont pas encore pleinement visibles et affecteront fortement nos économies qui sont tributaires, spécialement les économies qui sont tributaires des exportations de matières premières, mais aussi nos PME qui sont toutes essentiellement informelles, comme je l'avais dit précédemment. Donc, depuis le début de la pandémie sur le continent, notre position en tant qu'agence africaine de développement est que l'Afrique n'a pas le luxe de se permettre un confinement total de son économie. On ne peut pas le faire. Nous ne pouvons pas mettre la précarité en quarantaine, c'est impossible. Nous devons par tous les moyens possibles protéger nos moyens de subsistance, spécialement pour les personnes les plus vulnérables. Donc, l'investissement dans les infrastructures durables en tant que levier essentiel pour la relance économique et en tant que service public pour les collectivités est donc une des façons d'atteindre cet objectif de préservation de nos moyens de subsistance et de relèvement de nos économies. Et en tant qu'institution donc chargée de renforcer la capacité et la résilience des économies africaines, nous pensons qu'une option politique viable pour atténuer, une option politique, un engagement politique en fait pour atténuer les conséquences socio-économiques de cette pandémie consiste à promouvoir la fourniture de services nécessaires par le développement des infrastructures à petite échelle et avec les petites et les moyennes entreprises. C'est extrêmement important que les États se lancent dans des travaux d'infrastructures qui permettent d'attribuer des marchés, des opportunités de développement aux micro, petites et moyennes entreprises au niveau national, mais aussi au niveau régional. Et outre les améliorations de la qualité de vie grâce à l'accès à l'eau, par exemple, à l'électricité, aux services internes, Internet de communication, les infrastructures vont avoir un effet direct sur l'activité économique, tel que l'investissement à l'emploi et généreront en fin de compte des revenus supplémentaires pour nos concitoyens. C'est pour ça qu'au sein de cette institution, nous, on s'est positionné pour le développement des infrastructures comme un modèle essentiel de la reprise économique post-Covid en Afrique. Donc, mesdames et messieurs, à travers le réseau continental des entreprises, donc que nous appelons en anglais CBN, Continental Business Network, et le mécanisme de prestation de services pour la préparation des projets, donc le SDM, nous avons lancé un appel à proposition pour toutes les petites et moyennes entreprises et organisations non gouvernementales de tous les États membres de l'UA à soumettre des propositions de projets d'infrastructure à petite échelle. Nous allons donc soutenir ces PME et ces ONG avec des conseils pour la structuration de leurs projets et la mobilisation des financements. Donc, nous avons tous les outils nécessaires, spécialement les outils qui font partie de SDM, le service de prestation pour la préparation des projets, et nous allons effectivement apporter notre soutien aux PME qui vont compétir dans ce processus. Et de cette manière, donc, notre agence, l'AUDA-NEPAD, aidera les petites, les moyennes entreprises en Afrique et nos ONG qui réussiront à avoir un impact dans nos communautés. Nous allons donc les préparer à accéder aussi à des financements cohérents, à des financements viables pour leurs projets. Donc cet appel à proposition, mesdames et messieurs, est cohérent, est vraiment cohérent, et il est cohérent surtout avec le besoin urgent d'une approche multipartite et d'une collaboration publique et privée pour relever nos défis, des défis qui sont accentués en ce moment par cette pandémie. Et donc, en effet, la pandémie du Covid, qui est une crise transfrontalière, ne peut pas être résolue efficacement avec des instruments qui ne font pas appel à la coopération régionale et à la coopération continentale. C'est de cette façon et c'est pour cette raison que nous nous sommes immédiatement positionnés pour pouvoir apporter ce soutien à nos PME. Nous saluons donc en tant qu'agence de développement la coopération fructueuse de longue date avec nos partenaires. Je vais donc arrêter ici, nos partenaires, spécialement le gouvernement de l'Allemagne, donc à travers son agence de développement, mais aussi d'autres partenaires institutionnels comme la Banque africaine de développement, l'agence USAID aussi qui travaille avec nous dans ce cadre, spécialement pour la promotion des petites et moyennes entreprises, les entreprises, les banques qui ont travaillé avec nous, comme le groupe EcoBank, par exemple, qui travaille énormément avec nous sur ce dossier, mais aussi nos gouvernements, donc tous les gouvernements qui se sont volontairement portés à notre secours et qui se sont mis à travailler avec nous afin de rendre ce projet viable. Donc cet appel portera un regard particulier vraiment aux projets fournis par les femmes qui sont promotrices des PME, et je voudrais arrêter ici. Pour nous, c'est extrêmement important, je voudrais le rappeler, la dimension jeunesse et la dimension genre dans l'analyse de la prise en compte en fait de notre participation ou de l'aide que nous allons apporter aux entreprises qui auront concouru sur cette initiative. Donc, mesdames et messieurs, je voudrais vous remercier pour votre attention et je souhaite à tout le monde, à nous tous, je serai là dans les discussions, d'excellentes discussions avec beaucoup de stimulation. Il faut que nos discussions soient vraiment productives, participatives, afin que tous ensemble, nous puissions travailler à trouver des solutions aux problèmes et aux défis qui sont posés par la pandémie du Covid et qui entravent, mais vraiment entravent véritablement le travail et le développement de nos petites et moyennes entreprises en Afrique. Je vous remercie pour votre aimable attention.
And thank you very much, Director Amin. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Mr. Amin Idrissa Doom, the Director for Program Delivery and Coordination at AUDA-NEPAD, outlining the sort of the response that AUDA-NEPAD has given and contextualizing really for us that, you know, this economic crisis that followed the, the onset of the COVID-19 global pandemic really targeted, obviously not in a conscious way, but really affected rather our small and medium enterprises in quite a hefty way. And that has, as a result, affected the livelihoods of not just the hundreds of thousands of SMMEs that there are out there, but indeed the families that employees and owners of those SMMEs support. It was interesting though to realize that there is still a lot of, to hear that there is still a lot of financial resources available to support these resources. And so we are now going to pass into the presentation that will be given by Mr. Ibra Wahabu in that context, knowing that a lot of projects, as has been said previously, may in fact require in other sessions throughout this week, that project preparation is a really important part. And so we're going to now have this presentation from Mr. Wahabu, who is the lead for private sector development and infrastructure project preparation at AUDA-NEPAD, talking to us about AUDA-NEPAD's response to the COVID and attempts to support small and medium enterprises. Mr. Wahabu, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Program Director. Good afternoon to everyone, or good evening, or somehow good morning for those who are on the other part. Welcome to the conversation. I would like to outline the call for proposal, as you can see on the screen. It's all about economic recovery through small-scale infrastructure delivered by SMEs and NGOs registered and operating in Africa. I will start by providing a very short overview on the Continental Business Network. And for those who have attended the first session on Monday, we had a breakfast where we discuss in details what is the CBN and what is its objective. So just to emphasize, and I'm sure it will come during the conversation, that the CBN is the continental network for engaging private sector for infrastructure delivery in Africa. And by private sector, it definitely include the SMEs, but also the larger companies, particularly the SMEs, or because they are the subject of this conversation today. So what is the call for proposal? What is the rationale for this call for proposal? I think Director Amin has outlined the effect, or at least the dramatic effect of the COVID pandemic on small, medium enterprises, but also vulnerable communities in Africa. He particularly emphasizes on the fact that you cannot quarantine vulnerability or poverty. So it's bearing that in mind that AUDA-NEPAD designed, in collaboration with its partners, a proposal to support small and medium enterprises to mitigate, going forward, to mitigate the effect of the pandemic. And so the fundamental rationale is really to stimulate economic recovery from the bottom in supporting communities, but also SMEs, particularly those operating in the infrastructure sphere. And in the next slide, I will present you the targeted sector. So these are the sector that we are targeting. Like I said, it's about small scale infrastructure project and the community-driven approach to enhance the delivery of this basic service. And we have four main sector. One, in terms of power, is the renewable energy, because generally renewable energy offer a very flexible opportunities for large scale project development, for small scale project development. And health infrastructure. By health infrastructure, really we mean the physical infrastructure, but also health technology, because as you have been following within our conceptualization of infrastructure, soft infrastructure, particularly digital infrastructure, considered equally as relevant infrastructure for our economic transformation. The third sector, targeted sector, is water and sanitation. As I say, one of the really impact of this pandemic is it revealed our vulnerability for basic service access, like water and sanitation. So if we can find a way to harness or to support the structuring and the financing of a better project in relating to those basic social service, it will be a great benefit for the community. And then lastly, you have the ICT. I think the pandemic also reveals another characteristic of SMEs, which is innovation. Across the world, and particularly in Africa, SMEs were at the front line in innovating or developing ideas to provide solution to this emerging reality that we will be living in, I think, for years to come. So supporting this kind of ideas to make them a reality, I think it's very important for the African Union Development Agency. These are the target sector for this call for proposal. Now, how are we going to proceed to assess the applications? Like the process is outlined there. We have first of all the project itself. So these are the criteria, the selection and assessment criteria. The project must be, like I said, in one of those four sectors, and then the project need to have a socio-economic value, and then we have to consider also the technical or the business case of the project. The project may not necessarily be commercially motivated, but even if the project is not commercially motivated, let's say if it's a non-commercial project, we need to see a sustainable plan. So a plan for its sustainability, because it's very important. And then we have some criteria on the project owner or the project sponsor. And then also we have the second stage is in terms of the criteria that we will use to screen the project and to rank them in order to select the best one. So like I said, the value proposition in terms of social economic development, the contribution to mitigating the COVID pandemic economic drawback, and then in terms of technical viability of the project, we will be looking to some standard project development or project viability indicators. So we will look at the financial aspect, we look at the technical viability, we will look at the issue around governance, but evidently we will look around issue around social and environmental impact in assessing the project. Now, the fundamental question I'm sure many will ask, okay, all this, what will be the services? So we will support the selected project in 3 dimensions. One, in terms of business development, financing support, and capacity building. I would have to emphasize on financing support that in most of our advisory and technical assistance service at AUDA-NEPAD do not consist in transferring funds or providing grants or loan. No, we provide the expertise necessary to harness the financing. I will start with the business development support. I think for most SMEs and most likely most NGOs, one of the critical challenges they have across the continent is how can they make a case for their idea? So in this component, the selected project will be provided with technical and process advisory to enhance or to build a strong case for the project. And in terms of the financial support, really we will provide top experts that will accompany the project sponsor or the SMEs or the NGO to review their financial model and to design an appropriate financial modeling that respond to the demand of the market. We will undertake market sounding for the project, and then we will provide market packaging so that we can help the project owner, the SMEs or the NGOs to access financing. And as you may hear, every time we talk about project, particularly at the smaller scale, financier will tell you that the issue is not about the funding, the issue is about the viability of the project. So this is very important. Instead of disbursing small amount of grant to business that are not viable, we think the most important point is to help the project owners to build sound business case and strong financial justification for the business, and then they can easily tap into funding. The last aspect is about capacity building. And the capacity building is particularly for SMEs nowadays, all about the information. During the CBN breakfast, one of the participants from the private sector has highlighted the fact that they don't have access to information, and even if they do, they don't have the means to have access to this information. So the capacity building support that we will provide to the selected SMEs or NGOs will really consist about market, but also potential in terms of how can they maximize local content in their operation. So briefly, these are the services that the selected SMEs or NGOs will benefit from this call for proposal. And finally, what is the timeline? We have launched this call for proposal earlier in December, I think around the 10th or the 15th, and then we are planning to close the call on the 31st of this month, January. I mean December 2020. That when I said December. So we are closing on the 31st of January, and ideally, if everything goes as planned, by March 2021, we have a clear defined work plan. We have deployed the required experts that will be working with the SMEs and the NGOs till July 2021, where we will close this phase of the project. This is the end of my presentation. Program Director and colleagues, thank you, and the audience for your kind attention. I will hand over to you, and certainly I will be back during the Q&A session to respond to some of the questions that the audience might have. I thank you so much once again. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ibra, for outlining that call. I sincerely hope that we do have SME owners and people who work in the SME space in those sectors that you indicated who are interested and perhaps are not sure how to respond to the particular call. And please, I invite you, if you have questions for Ibra specifically around the call itself, please do start typing those questions in the chat, and we will come to those at the end of our panel discussion. I beg your pardon, in the Q&A session rather. I will gather those questions and we'll come to those questions after our panel discussion. And so now we are going to have a panel discussion, and the panelists are Ms. Asme Buredaya, who is a special advisor on the private sector engagement and resource mobilization to AUDA-NEPAD. We have as well Dr. Salifu Sidhu, who is the CEO of SME Trade Links. We have Mr. Nicholas Melcho, who is a program manager and advisor in GIZ's support to AUDA-NEPAD. And we have Mr. Bonga Masoka, who is the founder and chief executive at Splash Coatings Africa, which is in and of itself an SME. So I thank you all for joining us this afternoon, and I'm going to just begin the discussion with a question specifically to Asme from AUDA-NEPAD about the Mr. Director Amin already spoke a little bit about it, but can you just tell us a little bit more about the support you provide at AUDA-NEPAD to SMMEs, and more specifically, how has that support changed following the onset of the global pandemic, i.e. in the last year or so? How has your support for these SMMEs changed at AUDA-NEPAD? Asme?
Thank you very much, Simba, and I would like to first of all appreciate the presence of all the panelists and participants today. Thank you very much, and special thanks to Mr. Idris Amin Adoum, who gave us the opening remarks and who set the landscape of the discussion today, as well as Wahabu Ibra, who presented the initiative that the AUDA-NEPAD is undertaking in order to help MSMEs in infrastructure. With that being said, AUDA-NEPAD as an implementing agency or as an executing agency of the policies of the African Union has always, since its new mandate, has always been very keen and very sensitive to private sector. So, and as we all know, and as Director Amin said, private sector in the continent is not only the big sharks, as we say, but it's also the MSMEs. And we give them a very big importance even before the pandemic. The 100,000 MSMEs program has been launched before the pandemic, but of course, since its implementation was in the face of the COVID-19 outbreak, the teams had to accommodate themselves in order to comply with the needs of those MSMEs. So one very concrete step was the establishment of the Academy of the MSMEs, which was virtually integrated in more than 10 countries, and I stand to be corrected by Director Amin, covering all the regions of the continent. The second thing is that when we have this outbreak, we found that in the African case, communities, which include the private sector, gathered together and organized themselves in order to find solutions to this problem. So those MSMEs, we have worked with them hand in hand, as we say. We have done a benchmarking, and believe me, the results are outstanding. The level of creativity, the initiatives that those MSMEs had is just beyond the imagination of what we were expecting. So we found that they have three main issues. The first issue is the access to financing. This is their first issue, but actually the access to financing is not the first issue of an MSMEs. As Ibra said, we can find finances if the project is viable enough, proves its viability. So the first issue is for them to learn to incapacitate in the project planification, in how to make a strong business plan. You can have the initiative, but you cannot, you don't know how to sell it. It's not going to work. So the bankers, the financiers, even the business angels, when they come and talk with the MSMEs and they find that they don't have the tools and the knowledge to present their projects and to present its viability and to believe in it, they cannot have it. So this is one thing that's tackled by the MSMEs Academy that's launched by the AUDA-NEPAD. Second thing is the access to market. So for the access to market, we have done two separate initiatives. We have the COVID-19 response plan of action, which is an initiative that gathered all the teams of AUDA-NEPAD in order to find solutions, rapid solutions, one of them to private sector. And we've done the benchmarking in order to enlist those entities of the private sector, MSMEs especially, who have some initiatives to fight COVID-19. Either they are preparing PPEs, they are now in the commerce of hydro gels, or etc. We have enlisted them and presented them to the AMDF and to the African Union in order to be put in the platform that's been designed by Stras Massiva. And thirdly, the most important, the third most important thing is that we are ready today to receive the call for proposals, as Ibra has presented, in order to communicate directly with those who feel like they have an impact on infrastructure. Because we know that some small enterprises, medium enterprises, they know how to, for example, electrify a village, a small village, 10 houses, bring water to like a district. We want these projects also to beneficiate from this capacity building and empowerment we would like to give them. And I believe that the team and I personally will be here to engage with them, and I call upon all MSMEs today to respond to the call and just submit their projects. Back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Asme, for outlining some of that support. And it was very interesting to see that even before this call, I suppose this call is just part of this rapid COVID response plan that you spoke of earlier. So it's interesting just to see how quick you were as AUDA-NEPAD to respond to some of the needs that, well, the very big and pressing need that COVID obviously presented. And with that, I would just like to now bring into the discussion Niklas from GIZ. Reason being, GIZ is a German organization and development partner, and I'm interested, Niklas, in finding out a little bit more about GIZ's involvement in SME development and an understanding of, you know, how this particular COVID opportunity fits in with that broader context.
Thank you very much, program facilitator, and good day to all the guests who are joining us virtually, and also welcome to my colleagues on the panel. And obviously a big thanks to AUDA-NEPAD also for giving us the opportunity as GIZ to share this discussion. let me start by saying, as Simba introduced, my name is Niklas Malcho. I'm based in Johannesburg, South Africa, and I work within the GIZ Support to PIDA program, and we are working very closely with the colleagues of AUDA-NEPAD on the areas of infrastructure project preparation, the participation and inclusion of the private sector, and also employment promotion. Before saying maybe one or two remarks, I will briefly introduce the mandate and the mission of GIZ, maybe for some of the colleagues unfamiliar, and then make one remark, hopefully interested to the audience. So we as GIZ, we are a German federal enterprise, and we are a service provider for sustainable development and ultimately act as a technical assistance provider in the field of international cooperation, working on various sectors globally in about 120 countries. And in that cooperation or in that daily work, we mainly work with governments, with partner governments, businesses, civil society actors, but also academia, to come up jointly, on the one hand with the design and then ultimately with the implementation of projects that will make a contribution to the sustainable development of communities. So specifically now, going into your question, Simba, in our program here in South Africa, while working with AUDA, we're developing tools ultimately applied by AUDA and AUDA member states to advance infrastructure projects, most of which tools I'm sure you have heard by now through the conference. Why this call for proposals now specifically, and why does GIZ want to become involved? I think maybe 2 points. So over the last 2 days or now 3 days, we have heard a lot of facts that will make it very clear why SMEs or why MSMEs are so important in the infrastructure space, and why they can be a core driver for sustainable development. On the one hand, 80% of Africa's labor force is in the informal space. There are over 90 million SMEs across the continent, 96% of which are micro enterprises. And as we heard from the African Development Dynamics report yesterday, only 2% excuse me, of women-led startups, SMEs, that receive the so-called venture capital funding, which is so important in oftentimes leveraging ideas of startups and SMEs. Now, what does that tell us, or what is a bit the broader idea to put this into better perspective, is that, to put it very boldly, SMEs are and will continue contributing highly to a country's employment sector. Not only that, they will also add value to education, to the knowledge development of the evolving workforce, obviously add to GDP development if recognized formally, and overall also grow productive socioeconomic development, but most importantly, improve household income distribution. And if we contrast it even further, for example, if I look at my home country, Germany now, where over 99% of all companies in the economy are SMEs, and those SMEs create more than half of the total jobs in Germany, it's quite fascinating. And it tells you that the backbone of the economy in Germany are essentially SMEs. Regardless of that fact, now going maybe to COVID-19 now, is that due to the lockdowns, for example, we saw that specifically our education sector was not sufficiently prepared with infrastructure, with ICT infrastructure, particularly to cater to that new reality of remote teaching. And this is, as Ibrahim mentioned in his kickoff presentation, where innovation becomes so important. And innovation mostly happening through SMEs, through startups, through tech spaces in the infrastructure, ICT, and education sector. And we think that this is also the, how do you say, maybe the broader vision for this call for proposals, where we as GIZ, together with AUDA-NEPAD, are hoping to make that contribution to absorb that innovation and to stimulate socioeconomic progress by providing technical assistance to facilitate funding for your business case or for the MSME/NGO business case put forward by your submissions. Maybe as the second and last remark, Ibra mentioned the CBN breakfast on Monday, where actually one of the next panel speakers, Bonga Masoka, made it very clear that SMEs should gain more prominence of government support, require finance to test innovative ideas, mentor and skill people, and ultimately put them to work and to build the backbone of the economy. So, and I think that puts exactly where we want to go with this call for proposals, or rather what we would like to foster, namely innovative, small-scale infrastructure projects that have business cases and that through the multiple technical assistance instruments that AUDA-NEPAD has can leverage funding. So maybe with those remarks, Program Director, over to you, and I'm happy to answer any further questions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Niklas, for outlining that cooperation between GIZ and AUDA-NEPAD and the organization's greater commitment, in fact, to SME development on the continent. With that, I would like to, you mentioned Bonga Masoka, and so with that, I would just like to get a sense from Bonga in terms of you know, all the sorts of opportunities that exist out there. You are an SME who is on this panel, and I'm just trying to get a sense, is this kind of an opportunity the kind that perhaps you or one of your clients and or suppliers might benefit from? And if so, how?
Thank you very much, Program Director, and to all the participants who are taking part in the session. But of note, I would like to say thank you very much for the invitation. This speaks volume about AUDA's commitment to involving young people in the continent, in the development, in the infrastructure development of this continent. It's really appreciated. To answer your question in brief, yes, this is a great initiative. But to emphasize on where the response or where the answer is coming from, Splash Coatings Africa is one of the premium paint manufacturing company in South Africa. And we specialize, or we deal with a lot of MSMEs in the built infrastructure space. And if you are aware that most of the SMEs are youth-owned and partially women-owned. And when you talk about young people in general, you're talking about a demography that is widely either known or argued to be inexperienced, underskilled and incapacitated, more especially when it comes to large-scale infrastructure development projects, or to even a large extent, not even talking about large-scale infrastructure development projects, but just any infrastructure development project. We've seen a lot of those cases in South Africa where an SMME would be given an opportunity to build a road. And the next thing, the skills and the expertise and the experience to build the road are not sufficient. And 2 years down the line, the road that was built is not sufficient enough, you know. So in some of the cases with my clients and some of the other entrepreneurs and SMMEs that we work with, we hear a lot about capital, you know, how they struggle with access to capital, more especially from institutional investors and institutional investors and financiers, you know. And access to capital is a big phenomenon. And I'm using the South African case because if one is given a project and they have insufficient access to capital, that on its own creates, or it ends up compromising the status and the quality of the deliverables, you know. So I'm just emphasizing on the importance of this, why I feel or think that this is a very important initiative. In one of the sessions that I was a panelist in on Monday, we were talking about the role of entrepreneurs or SMMEs in large-scale infrastructure development projects. And one of the topics that was raised was access to information, you know. And what I realized is that in a fast-growing information or knowledge economy, access to information, including skills and expertise, to a large extent, you know, access to such information and skills and expertise is key. But with such an economy, with such information economy, what I've also realized is that knowledge is often privatized and commodified, you know. And I'm highlighting on this because I want to stress how important this initiative is, and for the fact that, you know, AUDA is making it available for free. You know, also still on the issue of access to information, you know, sometimes not knowing what and how to access, not knowing what and how to access or to acquire accessible information still defeats the purpose of access to information. And what I'm trying to say in this is that it would be greatly appreciated to see all member states adopting this initiative and making the information, more especially the call for proposal, making it widely known and available to young people. There are a significant number of young people who've got access to information through their cell phones, through internet, but they don't know what information to access. And such information is something that we need to prioritize to make sure that each and everyone, whether you are in the infrastructure space or not, you should be able to know that there's such information that you could always acquire to enhance or develop your skills, your expertise, and also gain institutional finance and investment in your entrepreneurial pursuits.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bonga, for painting your personal experience and how the lack of access to certain things is problematic. And so with that, I would like to encourage everyone on this call to reach out to people in their own networks and tell them about this call for proposals. Ibra has, I believe it was posted, an answer to the link of where people can find out more about how to submit their own calls. And with that, I'd like to bring in Dr. Sidhu from SME Trade Links. And first, I'd just like to confirm my understanding that SME Trade Links works a fair amount in the tourism space. And the reason I raise that question is I'm trying to get a sense of, one, what do you at SME Trade Links actually do? And then two, how does such a call for the development of infrastructure, that's pushing for the development of infrastructure, help you and the organizations you work with at SME Trade Links?
Thank you very much, Program Director, and thank you very much to AUDA-NEPAD for inviting SME Trade Links to participate in this important discussion. Greetings to fellow panelists and all participating delegates in this discussion. SME Trade Links is a small business development organization. We provide business development services, mentorship, incubation, access to market, and access to finance for South African SMEs, particularly those active in the tourism sector. Now, we work with large corporate entities to help them comply with, for those who are familiar with the South African political economy, we have what we call the BEE Act, which has a particular element called enterprise and supply development. And what it means essentially is that all large corporates, all South African companies that make turnover of over 50 million rand have to invest a certain percentage of their tax after profit into developing small tourism entities, particularly those that are in their value chains. So that is basically the business that we are in. We help large entities comply with that particular element, and in so doing, we also help small businesses access finance, access to market, and access to the skills that they need in order to grow and create the jobs that we are all talking about that will take this country and Africa forward. Now, we also work, we also provide tourism development consulting and advisory services. And we have worked and we continue to work with international organizations such as UNECA and similar organizations in the tourism sector. So, how would a call like this benefit the tourism industry? That is a very important question, and I would answer it by saying that this is exactly the kind of initiatives that we in tourism have been expecting from policymakers, from people whose business it is to really look into strategies of developing our continent. Infrastructure and tourism go hand in hand. There is no tourism without infrastructure. I mean, that's basically something that is known to all of us. Now, I'd like to make the following point that COVID-19 has actually made it, has laid bare our weaknesses and our gaps in terms of developing our tourism sector. We have not been able to basically receive the international tourists, which in most African tourism destinations have been the bread and butter of the industry. Well, COVID has basically put paid to that and has forced us to really look at the domestic tourism as the alternative. However, the domestic tourism cannot really be as profitable as international tourism, simply because there's a gap in the market. There's a gap in terms of tourism product specifically targeting the domestic tourism, the domestic tourist. Because what we have, the tourism plant that we have in most African countries, like I've already said, is geared towards the international tourist. So now that we have basically seen the shortcomings of that of a strategy like that, we need to really refocus our minds in terms of developing our domestic tourism, but also with the advent of the AFCFTA, which came on board 1st of January this year, we now need to also look at regional tourism as an alternative to the long-held strategy of promoting international tourism. Now, if I am correct on that premise that we need to develop domestic tourism and regional tourism, then it goes without saying that one of the critical elements would be infrastructural development. We'll need to provide the roads, we'll need to provide the airports, we'll need to provide the clean water, the electricity, and the connectivity, namely ICT services that will be needed to pursue that project. Also, another aspect that is critical and that we need to take into consideration, most of the tourism attractions in our African countries are actually very inaccessible to the tourist. So we need to look at ways of supporting infrastructure development that provide access to those tourism attractions. And it does not really have to be only the national governments that can develop those roads. If we take into consideration the concept of a community-based tourism, we can actually organize communities. We can organize communities that have access to land, communities that have access to who live nearby significant tourism attractions, and help them with the roads that they need to create in order to provide access to tourists to those attractions, the electricity that they need to provide electricity to the accommodations that they will need to build. They would also need the health services that will be required to look after those tourists. So it really does not take a lot of stretch of the imagination to think that if now there is at continental level an agency that is making it its business to mobilize resources to find ways of supporting the tourism entrepreneur, not just the tourist guide or the tour operator, but people who want to get into the infrastructural development as it relates to tourism. I think that is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful opportunity that should be welcomed with both hands. And I just wanted to provide, say, an example of infrastructure that can be supported to facilitate tourism, particularly rural tourism or community-based tourism. And that's what we call tourism routes developments, for instance, how to link different destinations together to form a route, usually theme-based, but route development will need infrastructural development, whether it is to build dirt roads connecting the different destinations, providing signage alongside those routes, creating, helping entrepreneurs build restaurants, helping them build guest houses, you name it. The opportunities are there, and there's definitely a very clear link between infrastructure development and tourism development. And I'm glad to see that AUDA-NEPAD is now embarking on that particular strategy. I will stop there. Thank you very much, Program Director.
No, thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Dr. Sidhu. Yeah, it's strange. I'd never, frankly, fully appreciated the, one almost takes for granted, but I suppose this is one of the definitions of infrastructure. When it works, and you don't realize it. So I had often not taken into consideration how infrastructure both impacts my experience at tourism places, but also my ability to get to them, whether it's booking online, whether it's driving to place X, whether it's seeing the solar panels on a particular tourism site. So yeah, thanks for reminding us about that strong link. I do not like time because our time for today is officially up. But before we close the session, I just want to draw people's attention to some of the questions that were asked. And I'm just going to start with a comment, which was to Nicholas from GIZ. Dr. Arthur says, great points raised about the need to exchange lessons and to craft coordinated and best policy responses. And I think for me, Dr. Sidhu even spoke to that in his tourism response, talking about how, you know, we as Africans need to not just visit our own countries, but visit Africa. And for that, tourism development and infrastructure play a critical role in those discussions. Then there were a couple of questions around the proposal, the call for proposal itself. And many of those questions have been answered by Ibra. To those of you who did not know, I just want to read the questions and the answers for you so that you are aware. And so the first question was, will there be an extension after the 31st of January? And Ibra says, we would rather encourage SMEs and NGOs to submit at least a draft of their application by the 31st of January with contact details. That's important because Ibra goes on to say that we can then work if after the selection process we think you have a good idea or a potentially viable idea. We can work on trying to develop that with you as long as we have a way of contacting you. And if we don't have, if we do extend the call, we unfortunately won't have enough time to properly assist projects. Which brings us to a question from Carla, who mentions that, you know, March to July is a fairly short time space to give good development support to projects to get them to bankability. And so her question is, how does AUDA-NEPAD intend to advance the select projects after the window so that, you know, the chosen projects are truly successful? And Ibra, in his response, says, you know, the timing is short, and, you know, we will have to look at things on a case-by-case basis. You know, some projects may take shorter and some projects may take longer, and we will work on those that may take longer as is appropriate. And then just a final question from Dr. Fofana, which was, can you provide the link? And what I have done is I'm just going to put in the chat to all panelists where you can find the link. It's available en français as well as in English. And you can just click on that link quickly now before your Zoom window closes at the end of the session to find a way of joining the call. And so with that, I would like to, unfortunately, time, like I said, it was not on our side today. I suppose it never is. But I'd like to invite back Dr. Amin Idris Adum, again, the director from AUDA-NEPAD, just to offer some closing remarks for us on this afternoon and this afternoon's discussion and the call for proposal itself. Dr. Amin, the floor is yours.
Sorry, Program Director, the closing will be provided by Dr. Tawela, Head of Economic Integration at AUDA-NEPAD.
All right, thank you for that. I apologize, that was a new addition to the program. Dr. Tawela, as Head of Integration at AUDA-NEPAD, Economic Integration, I beg your pardon, at AUDA-NEPAD, I invite you to please offer your closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Simba, and apologies that Dr. Amin had to attend to other things, so he was not ready to make these closing remarks at the moment. But I think in closing, what I would say is that having listened to the conversation and some of the inputs around the need to actually support MSMEs in terms of their ability to participate in large and medium-scale infrastructure projects, and very specifically also considering the times that we are in, where COVID-19 is really forcing us to re-examine the way in which we approach infrastructure development, and also the way in which we support the various actors along the value chain. And I think I liked what Asme said about the fact that we should not focus only on the big sharks, but that we have to think about the little people that are an essential part of this value chain. Thank you also to the various panelists and presenters. I think some very insightful views from our panelists that are coming from the SME and MSME sector, as well as the contributions from our partner GIZ. So from my side, in closing, really just to thank everybody and to assure you that we are committed to this idea of making sure that even as we are working on these large-scale transboundary infrastructure projects, that we do not lose sight of the linkages to national and regional infrastructure and to the actors that make these things possible along the value chain. So this particular call is one of those efforts where we are looking at saying, how do we make sure that we are bringing in new thinking, new ideas, new innovations to respond to the demands that COVID-19 is placing on us specifically, but also to make sure that we are able to bring in other actors into the infrastructure development value chain. So with those words, really just to thank you, Simba, for your moderation, and to thank everybody for the participation in this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nyirenda, for those closing words. And with that, we have come almost to the end. It's now left for me just to say thank you to all our panelists. It's interesting, we've had people who assist SMMEs, we've had an SMME themselves, and we've had AUDA-NEPAD and a development partner. And I want to say thank you to all of you for your contributions, because in your own ways, you are helping to build the world and to make lives better and livelihoods possible. So thank you to the work you do in your everyday lives. And thank you for joining us this afternoon. I liked, I'm paraphrasing, but I liked what Dr. Nyirenda said in her closing, that the little people matter. They make a difference, in this case, the SMMEs. So I'd like to encourage all of us working with SMMEs and in the SME space to continue the good fight. And just as a final reminder to everybody, I have posted in the chat the link to the call itself. Please click on it now, because I think once this call ends, it'll disappear. But in any event, both this conversation as well as information about the call itself are available on the PIDA website, which is www.au-pida.org. You just click on the links in the banner, either for information about PIDA Week or about the call for proposal itself. Thank you, everybody. Have a good afternoon. Shukran, merci, obrigado, asante sana. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Simba. Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone. Thanks.